It's time to go on the record with WRAL News.
Good evening and welcome to On the Record. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief. Thanks for joining us tonight. Let's get right to it. Tonight we have with us Auditor-elect Dave Boliek. He is the former UNC chair of the Board of Trustees and is going to be taking over the job long occupied by Democrat Beth Wood. We all know that ended oddly, you might say, and you beat Jessica Holmes, who's the current incumbent, to take over this job. Welcome to On the Record.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Laura.
So let me ask a little bit. This is your first elected office, correct?
Yes, correct. Never been elected before.
Some people might say it's a strange place to start, especially for somebody who's not a CPA. Can you talk me through why it is you decided to run for this?
Right. Well, and I've said this before on the campaign trail, the primary motivator or what sort of tipped me into running for state auditor occurred from my work on the board at UNC Chapel Hill. When I first arrived on that board, the university was run by a minimum of 16 separate budgets, running a $4.4 billion annual spend. During orientation, I was told that. I thought that was a problem. I worked really hard through board efforts and worked with the administration at Chapel Hill to change that to one forward-looking, unified, all-funds budget, which is now, by the way, in place at all system university schools. And in the process, we discovered a $100 million structural deficit that we were able to eventually straighten up and balance that budget. It was that experience that sort of led me to the idea of running for state auditor.
One of the things that you got a lot of attention for in your time there at UNC has been your push against diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Can you talk a little bit about why that was important to you?
Yeah, well, in my experience, the what I call DEI administrative apparatus was not returning the university or the taxpayers or the students a return on investment. There was a lot of administration involved in that and really no results. And so I don't see the purpose of it. I think people should be hired. I think they should get into the school. I think they should be a part of the university community based on their merit and based on their personality, not based on any other attribute.
But I mean, there's been a lot of research that shows that inclusive businesses, for example, diverse businesses do better than non-diverse businesses do. Why say that this wasn't making a return? Is it possible there were intangible returns that simply weren't showing up on the books?
Well, two types, when you're talking about return on investment, I view return on investment in two ways. One, there's a dollars and cents return, and two, there is, as you point out, a cultural and a sort of a way of doing business and a quality of life return on investment. But these DEI efforts really were, number one, divisive, and there are studies also that I could point to that show that DEI efforts, particularly in the higher education space, were divisive. So the competing studies can show different things, depending upon who's doing the study. But from my perspective and my personal experience on the board and what we saw at Chapel Hill, I didn't see the need for it. I didn't see the return. I found it to be administrative bloat.
So let's talk a little bit about one of the highest profile jobs that you're going to have that maybe you didn't even know you were going to have when you ran for this office, and that is the control of the Board of Elections.
Right.
And Senate Bill 382, which was passed recently over the governor's veto just earlier this month, actually, the legislature moved to take the control of the Board of Elections away from the governor, an incoming Democrat, Josh Stein, and give it to you, obviously an incoming Republican. Was this your idea?
No, well, I didn't ask for it. My idea when we started running for the office and when I campaigned was to be the state auditor. Hold government accountable, not only financially, but in effectiveness and efficiency. Not something I had anything to do with, didn't ask for it. But as I said, I was asked about it when Senate Bill 382 first was introduced. I didn't ask for it, but if the General Assembly and they did eventually see fit to delegate the Board of Elections to the state auditor. We're going to work with the inside the structure to be professional, efficient, effective, and nonpartisan in the way we operate with respect to the Board of Elections. I'm willing to take it on. It wasn't something I asked for, but we're going to be prepared to administer it on behalf of all the taxpayers.
But on the campaign trail, you did talk about wanting to investigate the Board of Elections. You claim that there are people who think that the elections are not secure, and that you wanted to audit them. But of course, they already have their own internal systems for auditing. Do you think those are insufficient?
Right. Well, that's a little bit like the fox watching the hen house to some extent. If you say, well, we're going to rely only on the internal auditors to make sure that any government agency, for example, is running the way it should be and the way it's supposed to be. What I did talk about is the fact that it is clear members of the public and lots of voters across North Carolina do not have confidence in the way the election process is run. That being said, I talked about auditing the Board of Elections. Now, the Board of Elections has not been audited in 14 years. And there's no reason why the state auditor shouldn't ask the questions of how, for example, is the State Board of Elections spending money, right, that is appropriated. So I don't find that to be unfair. I also don't find it unfair to ask tough questions in the Board of Elections space of what can we do as a state to make the public have confidence that their elections are run right. And I intend to do that in one way, shape, or form. I tend to work with the governor's office on that, tend to work with the legislature on that, and stakeholders all across North Carolina, because really in the end, it's about the public having confidence in their elections.
Well, one of the changes that comes with this change is that you would be in charge of choosing the Board of Elections, who is in charge of choosing the state elections director, and the majority on that board and on all the county boards would become Republican because you are Republican. I know you're talking about being nonpartisan, but it seems from looking from the outside, this looks like a fairly partisan ploy. Are they expecting results, do you think, Republican lawmakers, that are going to be more favorable to them?
Yeah, so when you say they, you're referring to legislators.
State lawmakers, I'm sorry, yes.
Well, you could ask the same question of Governor Cooper, who was in charge of the Board of Elections, who appointed majority Democrats to the board.
Right.
So,
and that's a law, and it would be the law under you too. Not
correct.
that you would choose to do it that way, or
right.
that he did. But.
So to say that it's somehow different from the way it had been under a Democrat administrator would, I think, be an unfair characterization. Look, we're going to work to try to make all elections in the state of North Carolina administered in such a way that every single voter in North Carolina has confidence that their vote is counted, it's counted one time, and that the results are legitimate.
Do you have reason to believe that any results have not been legitimate?
No, I haven't been in the weeds on knowing one way or the other whether elections, how these votes are counted. When you're running for office, you quite frankly have no choice but to accept kind of what's there. And if we had lost the election, I would have accepted the results and moved forward. And I have no reason to believe one way or the other. I do think there are some things that we can do, though, to be more transparent with the general public, to give them additional confidence. We can also really strive, as the state of Florida has done, to get the votes counted on Election Day.
One quick question: when you take over the Board of Elections, you're going to be taking over a court case that involves a case on the Supreme Court. The Election Board is, of course, a party to that case. Republican Jefferson Griffin has sued to basically have about 60,000 votes removed. Do you have a position on that case?
Not really, other than the fact that I think that any candidate who is running for elected office should be afforded the due process to have their case heard, not only administratively, but through the court system if the case is properly filed. And my understanding is the case is properly filed, and Judge Griffin should have the opportunity to have due process and have that case heard and decided by the courts.
Would you want to change the state board's position here?
Not sure. I mean, I'd have to take a look at the details. Again, I think the key question on there is whatever position the state board has and whatever position either side of a court case like that has, I think you have to look at it through the lens of what is going to give the public the most confidence in the way the election is run and in the way the electoral process is administered.
Great. We need to go to a break now so we can pay some bills. Please stay with us. We'll be back with Auditor-elect, Dave Boliek, when we come back. Good evening. Welcome back to On the Record. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief, here with Auditor-elect Dave Boliek, a Republican moving into the auditor space for the first time in more than 16 years. We've been talking about elections. I want to talk about something else you talked about on the campaign trail, which is the Department of Motor Vehicles. Yeah. You had mentioned that you want to audit them for operational efficiency. Let's talk about that for a second, because normally when you think of the job of the auditor, it's the auditor's position to go through and audit how money is being spent. You're talking about doing a much broader audit than just how money is moving.
I am. And I'm not doing anything that the general statutes doesn't, number one, prescribe the state auditor to do, and not only prescribes it, but really requires that the state auditor take a look at, in addition to the financial competency of different agencies and institutions across the state of North Carolina, the statutes specifically ask the auditor to take a look at efficiency and effectiveness of state government and program results. What are the results of particular programs? So my administration, as we move forward, will be putting an additional emphasis on how to make state government more customer service friendly. Laura, the DMV has not been customer service friendly. I don't think you need, you don't need a lot of experts to come in and tell the public that's watching this show that the DMV has not been working for North Carolinians. So, if it can't be fixed, and it hasn't been from the past gubernatorial administrations, I'm prepared as the state auditor to do a floor-to-ceiling audit of the DMV and give some solid recommendations on how the state can make the DMV work better for every single North Carolinian. So I promised that on the campaign trail, and we're going to deliver.
Well, let me just throw this out there. You know, what we've heard a lot from the folks running the DMV now is that they are understaffed, and the salaries that they're able to offer simply aren't competitive with the private sector, and people don't want to come to work for the DMV. So it's chronically understaffed, as anybody who's tried to get an appointment, I think, is pretty aware. Suppose that it can't be done the way you want it to be done with the staff that's there. Would you recommend that the legislature appropriate money for more staff, or would you be in favor of perhaps privatizing the organization?
So there's the rub, and there is the question, and really the problem that I have, and one of the reasons why I also really wanted to run for public office, is that for years, you know, the answer from different departments to the legislature has been to go to the General Assembly with your hand out and ask for more money without a strategic plan on exactly how you're going to spend the additional dollars. I would fault the Cooper administration for not going to the General Assembly with a detailed plan of exactly how they're going to spend the money and exactly how they're going to make DMV better with additional funds. Now, that being said, I don't know the answer to the question because we haven't gotten in there, but I do know the results, and the results speak for themselves. It's an inefficient organization that requires people to wait months to get an appointment, to get a driver's license, or to get a real ID, or to try to strategize about how to drive 6 hours across the state of North Carolina to do a drop-in appointment somewhere where they might have some time. So those results speak for themselves, and it's not inappropriate for the state auditor to take a hard look on how we can make it better.
Now, in fairness, the budget requests that departments come through do fairly specifically lay out what they want to do with the money and how they plan to use that to improve performance. I mean, that is a part of the budgeting process when agencies have to do that. But I mean, here we're talking about operational efficiencies and strategic planning. I mean, there's a whole budget division in the legislature that looks at that. There's also the governmental operations committee, the oversight committee. So they go through and look at exactly what you're talking about, how efficiently things are being done, how things could be improved. Is what you're talking about going to be redundant with what the legislature is already doing?
I think what I'm talking about is going to be effective, because what's happening now isn't working.
All right. Another question for you. All right. And this one, again, goes to partisanship. There's a lot of concern, obviously, because of the way sort of the changes have been made in Senate Bill 382, which we should mention is still hung up in court. There's concern that you're going to bring a partisan take to the auditor's office and to elections as well. What are your thoughts on that? How do you reassure the public that you are coming at this in a nonpartisan way? Because if people think the auditor is partisan, they don't necessarily believe what the auditor is telling them.
Right. And it's interesting because I don't know that Beth Wood ever got that question. She was a registered Democrat, and no one ever said, well, there's a concern that the Democratic Party may bring a partisan view to the state auditor's office.
But Beth Wood was very outspoken when she talked about partisanship. She said, I take my hat off. She said, I'm after everybody.
And I've said the same thing, Laura. I've said I'm going to leave party politics at the door, and we're going to move forward for every single taxpayer in North Carolina. And it seems that those types of questions really come up when it's a Republican who takes office and not when a Democrat takes office. So all I can do is tell the folks that I am who I am. I'm going to leave the party politics at the door when it comes to the job of the state auditor. That doesn't mean I'm going to leave conservative principles at the door. That doesn't mean I'm going to leave my moral compass at the door. That means that I'm going to leave the party label at the door, go in and do the job on behalf of all North Carolinians. And, I'm going to stand on my record. I haven't been in office yet. We're going to get in there. We're going to get to work and let the people judge based on the work product that we put out.
So if there's a problem with an agency that's being run by somebody in your own party, we can expect you to look into that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the job of the state auditor. Again, I've been elected by all the people of the state of North Carolina, and those who didn't cast a ballot for me, they are no less important to me than the folks that did. I'm born and raised in this state. I love this state. Every single person in this state deserves a state auditor that's going to hold government accountable at all levels.
On that note, we're going to take another quick break. We need to go to commercial right now, but we'll be right back. And when we come back, we have to ask you about what everybody's talking about, and that's Chapel Bill. That's coming up after the break. Stay with us. Welcome back to On the Record. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief, here with Auditor-elect Dave Boliek. But I'm going to ask you to change hats here for a minute. At least until you take office as auditor, you are a member of the UNC Chapel Hill Board of Trustees and the former chair of that board. What everybody has been talking about for the last couple of weeks is, of course, the arrival of our new coach, Bill Belichick. You were in support of that. Can you talk a little bit about why you think that was a strategic hire?
Yeah, and never in my life heard so much hoopla over a football coach at Carolina, but I mean, it's a great thing for the university moving forward. A lot of reasons why. Number one, the college sports landscape has changed dramatically, probably over the last 4 years, particularly since the name, image, and likeness legislation or court case from the Supreme Court,
right,
allowing for a different way of dealing with individual players. In order to compete at the highest level of college athletics, universities are going to have to be, what I've said on the record, in the game, so to speak. And this hire puts UNC Chapel Hill football right front and center as relevant across the nation. And athletics is the front porch of the university, and we want to be competitive. Alumni at UNC Chapel Hill expect it. The people across North Carolina who may not have gone to UNC Chapel Hill but have told me, I may not have gone there, but I own the place and are great fans of the university, they expect the university to be competitive, and I view this as a now or never situation. And so I think the Bill Belichick hire puts UNC Chapel Hill football front and center. High risk, high reward, but the time is now.
Why is it now? Why do you feel like this is a make or break moment?
Well, because the money disparity between major college sports programs, solely mostly dependent upon which athletic conference they reside in,
right,
is really stark. SEC schools, Big Ten schools already receive somewhere between 35 and 45, so let's round, say 40 million extra dollars per year. That's not a $40 million one-time donation. That's $40 million per year more than we would receive at UNC Chapel Hill or that NC State would receive over here in Raleigh, right? And so that money can be used by the athletic department to hire coaches, build facilities,
pay for NIL
if need be. I mean, there's ways, there's appropriate ways to handle that particular situation, particularly with the House case settlement, which is going to make players able to share in the revenue.
Right.
So at Chapel Hill and at NC State, we're going to come up with around $20.5 million beginning July 1st in order to allow for revenue sharing with athletes. Additionally, these schools in the Big Ten and the SEC can charge exponentially more per ticket because of the product that's being put on the field. So
will the fans pay it though?
Well, they do in the SEC and they do in the Big Ten. And so I believe they will in Chapel Hill. We've already raised prices about 25% at Chapel Hill. I have estimated and said personally that if we were playing really high-level college football, we could charge between $100 and $150, maybe even $200 more per ticket for some games. And at 50,000 seats, you know, that's an extra, at $100 more, that's an extra $5 million a game. So when you're really talking about the dollars and cents, you're talking about potentially as much as 70 to 80 million more dollars a year.
Well, that's a bold prediction, and we're going to leave it at that. Thank you very much for talking to me. You're welcome to the show, and it was really great to have you.
Thanks.
Auditor-elect Dave Boliek. Thank you so much for watching tonight. If you have comments, complaints, thoughts about tonight's interview, you can email them to ontherecord@wrl.com. Thanks for watching.